give a giant FinOps X Europe round of applause to welcome our speakers, Mike Rosenberg and Alon Arvatz!
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Joe, can you do it again, please? Hi, everyone. I'm Alon Arvatz, CEO of PointFive. I'm really proud to be partnering with Nubank, and more specifically, Nubank's FinOps team, world-class FinOps team, and share with you some of the things that we've been working together. This is going to be a very practical presentation focused on all the steps Nubank took to actually drive action from engineers, which is probably one of the biggest challenges today when it comes to FinOps. And we want to do it very practical with real case studies. When Mike and I prepared for the session, I told him, Mike, people in the audience want to hear you, not me. So Mike, you'll do 95% of the talking, I'll do the other 5%, and that's exactly what we plan to do. So Mike, introduce yourself.
But you have the important job. You've got the
I'm your sidekick
remote here. Good day. I'm Mike Rosenberg, Senior Director of Engineering at Nubank. I like to describe myself as a retired engineer and a recovering accountant. So I've got a background in both. And you know, when the partnership started with PointFive, one of the things I really noticed is they looked at the configurations of resources. We're primarily an AWS shop, so I apologize if most of the references are with that cloud provider. But they looked at it at an infrastructure level and a config level. And how many folks here have been or currently are engineers? And how many of you like to read manuals? Oh, we got one. I'm an old Unix guy, and there's an old Unix term, RTFM. Read the, I'll let you fill in the F manual. They did that. They read the manual, so our engineers don't have to, and I'll explain why that's a good thing coming up here real quick. But let me tell you a little bit about Nubank. Our mission is to reduce the complexity of our customers' lives. We are a very large business. We have over 100 million customers in 3 countries. We're the largest digital bank outside of Asia, and we're one of the largest financial institutions in Latin America. We operate at a very massive scale. And this is a slide that sets the stage, and it's really important here. This comes from our second quarter investors deck. It's available online. We actually released tonight at 11 CET time for the current quarter, so you can see how that deck moves forward in time a little bit later today. But the thing, oh no, I want you to go back. The thing I want you to focus on is that gold line. That's called an efficiency ratio. Simplified, or simply saying it, it's a cost per revenue. In the banking space, your numerator are your costs to serve, and your denominator is revenue minus interest expense. And the more efficient the bank is, you know, you're spending less to earn that dollar. And why is that important at Nubank? Nubank's primary customer base were the non-banked. Currently, still in Latin America, there's roughly 70% of the citizens don't have a bank account and are not part of the financial system. In order to profitably and effectively serve that market, you have to have yourself a low cost to serve. That's one of the reasons the incumbent banks never really went after that market till we went after that market. And having that low cost to serve, that's pretty much a world-class number there at 32%. Our banks are right here on everybody's phone. We have no physical branches. We never have. We were born in the cloud, I think 11 years ago. And the cloud helps us have that efficiency ratio and bring more people into the financial services space, where in a country like Brazil, the average wage is incredibly low. And if we did an internal study that if we would have charged our customers what our competitors charged our customers in 2023, we would have had $8 billion more of revenue from fees. We want that money to be in the hands of our customers to make their lives better and go about the world as they wish. So for us, we operate at a massive scale. And you're going to see some of the numbers here, and they may astonish you as some of the findings of cost savings. Those are numbers we typically step over because we've got bigger fish to fry, more important things to do with the architecture, and actually bigger cost savings opportunity. Like I said, the company's been around a little over 11 years. I've been there 2 years, 9 months. So really as a formal FinOps function that has had executive sponsorship and approval and funding and whatnot, we're still fairly early in our process. And because the focus early on was product market adoption and growth, we've got a lot of cleanup. We delicately call it long tail efficiencies. I tend to call it following the elephant in the circus. So there's lots of things to clean up, lots of things to do, and we have a very, very large engineering staff, over 2,000 engineers. We are in that two pizza team model, so there's lots of squads, lots of disparate groups around, and sometimes going around and getting them to do things. You time slice yourself to all get out, and it makes it really, really hard to do that. But we want to get the engineers engaged by speaking their language. They don't care about debits and credits. They care about bits and bytes, and we need to talk to them in their language. And the other thing that we need to do is, living into the philosophy of the centralized FinOps team from the organization, we want to be able to track it from one place, manage it, and keep on top of things. Because some of these findings that you'll see individually aren't a lot of money, but in aggregate is one heck of a lot of money.
So this is the place where we and the Nubank partner together to actually address these needs. And our basic assumption was that actually driving action from engineers and maintaining efficiency of your infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges today in FinOps. In order to solve it, you have to be very, very methodological and follow all the steps to make it happen. In order to solve it, we actually developed a framework that helped Nubank and help our organization to drive action from engineers. It contains 4 different pillars, and you must have all 4 to actually make it happen. The first one is around ownership. This is the cultural aspect of the process, but it also have elements, technical elements that support it. So in order to reach ownership, you have to do resource discovery and attribution. You have to understand all the risks in your environment and who owns them. It's better even to automate and do automated resource attribution, which is some of the things we did with the Nubank, and Mike will elaborate later on. On top of that, there has to be an option for the engineers to go and see the findings themselves firsthand. We want to avoid a situation where the FinOps person chases engineer. The FinOps person role is not to chase engineers, not to follow up with them. Hey, when are you doing this? When are you doing that? So the engineers gotta have direct access to all the inefficiencies and anything they need to take care of. Second part is give them observability, so they know what they're doing wrong or what they can do better when it comes to their infrastructure. And we follow what we call deep waste detection. And that's not only giving them the basics of idle resources, but also give them deeper insights into the infrastructure around configurations, around architecture, not only compute, but also storage and networking and data transfer and other aspects that they're very interested to see. And what we experience is what once an engineer sees something that's really deep insight, didn't think about, he's like, huh, that's interesting. I learned something new. Now I'm going to do something about it. Or on the next time I'm going to build architecture, I'm going to take this into consideration. And that's exactly the type of engagement and interest we want to create. 3, context. Engineers doesn't like to do a lot of manual work, switch between different consoles. So when we identify a certain deep waste opportunity, we always want to give the engineer full context so we can make a decision directly from the platform. So the idea is to really give him or make it very easy for him to get this context, but also give him the confidence to make action and trust the recommendations. And the first pillar is really the action. And this is where you have to make it very, very easy for an engineer to take the remediation steps he needs to take. And that includes remediation workflow. Believe it or not every engineer knows how to fix a lot of these inefficiencies. So we need to guide him step by step on how to get it done. And we also need to automate wherever it's possible. So if you can do it with one click and it's fixed, that's amazing. Because it allows him the confidence to say, okay, I want to do something, the ability to press the button that make it happen, but also save at the same time 99% of the time he needs to invest in fixing these type of things. And the last part is really doing the integration directly into the ticketing system, where the engineers manage all of their tasks. So fixing the infrastructure and make it more efficient becomes part of their ongoing regular processes they already have in place. And Mike, please share a few of the case studies and how we implement this framework.
So we started with S3, and because we use a lot of it, petabytes and petabytes of S3. And the nice thing about it is it prioritized inefficiencies in the S3 that we found. And what I did to get things started was during our POC with PointFive, I would look at them, filter through them, and then go to an engineer. Hey, we're considering partnering with PointFive. Can you let me know if this is a false positive or the real deal? And I'd pick out some and send them out to various engineers, and they would validate that they are indeed correct. And they're like, well, what are we going to do about it? And I said, well, you're the engineer. Would you like to, can you fix this for me? And they would go ahead and they would make the change. And you get that buy-in and you build that trust in the tool by looking at all these. Some are very common findings and some are just really deep, arcane, out of the way, hidden around a corner collecting dust type of things. And the engineers would go in and they would validate them. And they would say, oh, I didn't realize that was a problem. And having PointFive create that visibility was very, very helpful. And the really deep inefficiencies are the thing, again, that put the hook into me, because we've got a great group of engineers, but what do engineers like to do? They like to focus on features, functions, capabilities, what's next, what's the next big thing. And inefficiencies, waste, remediation, that typically takes not even a second chair, sometimes a third or a fourth chair behind doing what's new and exciting and different. And to quantify it, to bring it all together and to show it to the engineers that, hey, this makes you a better engineer by understanding these inefficiencies. You won't make these mistakes going forward, but let's clean up the past a little bit. So let me show you one with S3. So what this one was, missing intelligent tiering on an S3 bucket, very basic. We obfuscated the cost because we have the number of terabytes down there, but the savings on that one bucket by going to intelligent tiering would be roughly $1,650 a month. That's a 30-day look back that's presented on the screen. But the cool part about it is the RTFMs on the right-hand side of the screen. What do you need to do? I don't need the engineer to go into the AWS docs. Source of friction reduction. If the engineer wants to go look for it in the S3 console, on another screen, you can just one click and go to the S3 console. Source of friction reduction. And again, it's all being launched out of PointFive, which makes, for me, that single pane of glass, they're really living into that. And they made the change. They made the adjustments, they changed the storage class. And the next day, we got this error popped. The number's not big. And I want to point out that the number of $86 being small is important at Nubank scale. We would not have caught this, ever. It would really fly below the radar. But one of the things that happens at Nubank, and you'll see with some of the other items coming up, is a phrase I like to use: no one raindrop thinks it's responsible for the flood. $86 isn't a lot. $86 with thousands of buckets, that's a lot of money every month. And I want that money to be put to productive use. As much as I love AWS, I still desire to be their least profitable customer. And again, it gives you the RTFM on the right-hand side of the screen. The issue was they were writing it to S3 standard, 0-day transition to S3 intelligent tiering standard. Then it would follow the intelligent tiering 90, 180-day flow into the colder storage. That additional transition is waste. And it's a tiny little speck of waste.
And Mike, you mentioned earlier the word trust and how important to build the trust between the engineers and the FinOps people. I think the fact that an engineer deploys a fix and a day later suddenly something new pops up, it also builds the trust of the engineers that you go very deep and anything that will pop up, we'll find and fix together. I think this is also a major part of this process of going deeper and deeper all the time.
And the thing is now the engineer knows you just don't change the storage class. So you got to make some modifications in the code to do the right thing the first time. So it's a teaching opportunity. And another piece that I really like is one of the things that I get benefit of is anything that can reduce cognitive load is a good thing. If you've gone through Cost Explorer or any other costing tool and you look at things by usage type, you've got your tier 1 expenses, your tier 2 expenses, 3 and 4 and so on, and all the myriad of billing codes that S3 has. And they're awesome and they're detailed, but they're kind of random in how they show up, and they show up in, cost order. When you look at the screen, what you see is I've got my storage costs separate and distinct from my data transfer, separate and distinct from my API costs. The engineer knows right where to look because the issues are in the major categories versus trying to decipher a whole bunch of billing codes, which I don't wish on anybody. And so for that, again, it makes it easy. This is the one, DynamoDB, that put the hook into me and said, these guys know what they're doing. And for us, we're one of the largest DynamoDB users in the world, period. We have a massive implementation of DynamoDB. And this one that they found, please go, is we found tables that were better off using standard infrequent access storage class versus standard access. And the cool thing about it is when I was first getting acquainted with the product, be slacking Alon, does it check for the price difference? And he'd say,
Yes.
Alon, does it include our EDP and our pricing structure from Amazon?
Yes.
What happens if it flips the other way and it becomes better off for us to use standard access? And you'd say, we got to.
We'll let you know about it.
Exactly. And it does the math and it lays it out, the before and the after. Really clear, really clean, low cognitive effort to figure out what's going on and why is it a benefit. Sometimes when you explain to engineers in things where the answer is in debits and credits like this. I went out also, as an aside, I went out and talked to our TAMs. If we change this storage class, what's going to happen to latency? Because latency matters when we're serving 100 million customers. And they validated nothing. So for me, this is a financial engineering move that is monitored and automated by the software. So that's the savings for one bucket in 1 month.
And Mike, I think one of the very interesting and smart move that you and your team did is actually giving the engineers the opportunity to challenge the recommendations. So all the questions that you gave me are actually questions that came from your engineering. So engineers like to challenge stuff. They like to doubt the validity of any recommendation you give them. And it's okay, it's their job. They're engineers. They always need to find the best way to do something and find where there are issues and fix them. That's what they do. That's the mindset. We're not supposed to try and change it. We should try and work with it. We try and leverage it to build the trust that we're talking about. So Mike didn't tell them, hey, fix it. He tell them, hey, we found something cool, something interesting. What do you say? And they came back with a list of questions. I remember this list of questions. Sending it to my team, hoping they will say on everything, yes on everything. But when you go back and say, yes, we took all this into consideration, and it's a serious recommendation that went through a lot of verification, this is where you gain the trust, and this is where you start getting them engaged and wanting to fix it.
And one of the other things is you can, through the front panel, filter. So for me, hey, we use a lot of DynamoDB. I can look at this opportunity, collect them together through the filter, publish that out, and now I've got a project. And we can all get it done really quick with some simple script work.
Yes. Now, one of the questions that we ask ourselves all the time, and we recommend everyone here in the audience to ask himself as well, is not only how you drive action, but also how you do it consistently. Because doing it as a one-off on a ad hoc basis, that anyone can do. The question is how you create this ongoing process where the efficiency of your infrastructure is being maintained over time. And there are 4 main components I would like to double click on and give more details in order to share with you how our customers and Nubank are doing that. So the first one is really, and we talked about at the beginning, attribute resources. So making sure that for every resource, you know who is the team responsible for this resource. So there's no question if something pops up, there is no question who should take care of it. So that's 1. 2, it is very, very important to give the engineers direct access to the findings for 2 reasons. 1, That's what gives them the sense of ownership of, okay, it's my responsibility to go and look and monitor it. Okay. And two, it also gives them all the context they need to actually drive action. So it makes it a lot easier from process perspective to get things done. Three, simple remediation flow. So you want to get to a point where you need to get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what you need to do to realize savings. Engineers don't always know all the steps they need to take. They don't read the manuals. So you have to guide them through it. Okay, they're not necessarily cost experts, even if they're infrastructure experts. And this is what's very important in order to reduce the friction and make it very easy for them. And three is to meet them in the platform they're currently working at. So with Nubank, for example, they work on Jira. So for us, it's very important to have a Jira integration that, on the one hand, will give the engineers the task into their regular process, into their regular SDLC, so they can prioritize it for the next sprint, and also get data back from Jira to the main FinOps platform. In this case, was PointFive. So the centralized FinOps team can see the status of all the opportunities and track the progress of their efficiency efforts. And Mike, please share with them how you go about it.
So with our tagging process, we're able to organize by business unit. So now I can see all the issues related to a business unit and keep on top of that by simply using the hierarchy that we have in place in our tagging structure that exists. It makes it very simple. So any engineer can log in and find their business unit and then look within their two pizza team, which we call a squad, and get down to business and start looking at things and evaluating them and determining, putting them in the Jira backlog and start the process of getting things fixed. So this one I really like. This is a true RTFM example. And in CloudFront distributions, you can use compression. And this one popped. And if you notice on the, the left-hand side of the screen for your left, compression's enabled. You can see the ENB, it says it's enabled. And I went round and round with the engineer. I said, can you validate this? Is this a false positive or is this the real deal? Because this was one of the test cases. And he's like, no, it's enabled. I'm 100% sure. We go back and forth. He'd send me screenshots from the Amazon console. Correct, it's enabled. But if you RTFM and look at the other side of the screen, there's 3 steps. You enable it, you select your compression technology, and you need a non-zero TTL for your caching. You don't get the benefits of saving that $5,000 a month till you do all 3 things. All 3 steps are laid out. Again, low friction, low cognitive load, makes it easy to take action, from the get-go. And I like that about the product. And I've seen them update the directions as Amazon makes changes. I've seen changes happen in the right-hand side of the screen, which is fantastic because I don't have to worry about keeping things up to date. The engineers over at PointFive do that for us. And for me, that's one less thing to worry about. So then we just punch the Jira button, open up a ticket. We have a process at Nubank where we have the centralized FinOps team, and then embedded within each business unit, we have a cost champion. And the cost champion are our force multiplier for FinOps. They're the eyes and ears, the people on the ground in the BUs. They know where the bodies are buried. They know the temperaments and the talent, and who to avoid and who to go to, because they're living it every day. So it goes to the cost champions Jira queue. And then the cost champions pick it up and put it into the squad's Jira queue so they can work on it. The reason we're doing it that way, and it's a little bit manual, is our squads form, break apart, and move all the time. I didn't want to create the overhead of having to map that every time there's a squad change and implement a process. Here's a Jira card so I can change my squad formation so we can make something different in the mapping in the background. That to me was too much operational burden. So we rely on our cost champions to get it out into the field and be the advocate for having this be put in the backlog and having action taken upon it. So for us, I love the centralized tracking. I can keep tabs on everything in one convenient place. There are awesome tools out there, and we'll talk about the Amazon tools. You've got Compute Optimizer, Trusted Advisor, the Cost Optimization Hub, and you have to go 3 different places to get things evaluated. And let's face it, some of us may or may not have noticed in the right sizing algorithm doesn't match in Trusted Advisor between Compute Optimizer. So now you have a person with 2 watches who never knows exactly what the time is. We have one place to go, one place to look to make it all happen. We can open up the JIRA cards. It's low friction. Anything that reduces operational friction and keeps the engineer engineering is a good thing. And that has value just beyond the debits and the credits. It makes their lives easier. Anything you do to put friction in front of an engineer, they shun you quickly. So we want to stay away from that. And then I can take these and group them up into like projects. So we're doing all the DynamoDB storage class work at one time. We're doing the S3 intelligent tiering work at one time, and I can make them into projects that are dedicated. And the cool part about it is all the quantification of the savings is done. And that helps sell it. So when I'm going to talk to engineering managers to say, hey, this one table only saves you this much, but you've got 50 tables in your portfolio. What would you like to do with this budget that you save? Let's get to work and get it done. And it makes it easier to sell the work, because oftentimes you do have to sell the work because, again, engineers want to work on the new things and nobody wants to follow the elephant. And following the elephant is quite profitable. And that's kind of what I consider what I do in the FinOps space, because, again, my role has only been there less than 3 years. Nubank's been there 11 years. So there's lots to clean up, lots to make better, and lots of value to create. Because, again, our value proposition is being a low cost to serve bank. And then they find things that I just get impressed. And one of the things I really like is there's context sensitive savings. In our names of some of our resources, we'll put staging or dev or test. So if it sees EC2 and then in the name it says dev, it sends up an alert. Why aren't you using Spot? You can afford an interruption in test. You can afford an interruption in dev. If it does not have that, that error doesn't trigger, even if the resource is identical in every other respect. But it picks up on the name, and I thought that was just a really cool, subtle feature that helps distinguish the right thing to do and make it that much better. And again, I think what's the 4th or 5th time they RTFM'd for me. And that, again, reduces cognitive load. It improves the velocity of the engineer's response. And velocity, when you can apply it to savings, is a good thing. And lastly, the debits and the credits are not the engineer's problem. The software does the work for you. Software does the work for us as well. And that also makes our centralized FinOps team it makes us much more efficient. It took us approximately 10 days to get a full ROI on our arrangement with PointFive. We got to savings quickly. And the reason is it found things we either step over or we just plain didn't know. And there's a lot of value in that. And we're able to turn that value into margin expansion by making those changes quickly. I like the accountability. And the thing I really like about the accountability is there's an activity log associated with each opportunity. If somebody goes in and looks at the opportunity, it said Alon was here on Tuesday at 10:48 in the morning. So when I go to Alon and say a week later, why haven't you fixed it? What are you talking about? It's right here. You were in the log. You looked at the opportunity. Why didn't you put it in the JIRA backlog? It's not to be a tattletale, but it does promote accountability. Plus, then I can put notes in there. The engineer can put notes in there. We have a centralized place to communicate about this one specific opportunity, and it's kept in memoriam. So it is part of the log in the history of this opportunity. And having that for traceability, because a couple months down the road, that's, time and finger pointing are correlated very highly to one another. So when we go forward in time and start asking questions and looking back on some things, what happened here, what happened there, we've got a log of exactly what happened built within the tool. And I really like that. And what I feel is an engineering tool built by engineers for engineers. Even though its end goal, from my perspective, is improving debits and credits, it really understands the bits and bytes at an incredibly deep level within the cloud provider. And they just are not AWS. What else do you?
We support all three clouds.
Exactly. So so regardless of who your hyperscaler is, it's going to find things I bet you wouldn't have found on your own.
Yeah. And from my perspective, when we think about success criteria, so you obviously have the savings and you have ROI. And in the Nubank case, within less than a month, you had a positive ROI already. That's easy. But for me, the most exciting and also interesting success metric is the engineer's engagement with the platform. And I would say, unlike other approaches, in this approach, the engineers actually engage with the platform. So Nubank has 2,000 engineers,
Roughly.
and they all have access directly to the findings, to learn from them, and to take action. And we look at the metrics of the engagement, we can also see that the FinOps team is on top of that, of course, but not only them. The cost champions that Mike described earlier, they're also logging in on a regular basis, basically every other week. And the rest of the engineers, the long tail of the engineers, it doesn't have to be on top of every day. They come and learn and implement stuff as they need based on their priority within their Jira. So like Mike described, the cost champion, he take the Jira ticket, put it on the board, and when the engineer gets it into his queue to take action, he can go directly into the platform and see for himself the findings, follow the steps of remediation, get all the context, and essentially make it very, very easy for him to take action and drive efficiency. Thank you very much. We have 13 minutes for questions. Hi. You don't need the mic, or you don't need the mic?
Just repeat the question.
Okay. We don't use Compute Optimizer at all. We considered doing that, but we basically learned that we can do things that are a lot more accurate ourselves. And for us, building the trust with the engineers, reliant on the accuracy of our recommendations and our findings. This is why everything is done by us. We actually have a dedicated research team. This is all they do: build algorithms to identify deep waste. We do this is the basic stuff. We do that for sure. Yeah, all of them, but we go way beyond. And Mike, share with you some of the examples. Yes, we also go to the object level. You would have to turn on S3 lens for us to be able to. So we have because S3 lens is also a bit more expensive, we have an opt-in option to S3 lens. We tell you S3 lens would cost you whatever, and if you will turn that on, it will surface the type of opportunities you just described. Okay. What's your name? Expedia. Okay.
Yep. We sat
Okay.
a couple chairs down from each other at dinner last night.
Cool.
Hey, one question I have: how have you noticed the differences in the ability to do optimizations, or what the opportunities are between cloud vendors? So, like a lot of people will talk a lot about AWS. There's a lot of knowledge. There's only one S3 lens. You won't find an S3 lens in Azure storage or cloud storage. So, how do you approach other cloud vendors? What are opportunities or restrictions that make it more or less successful as you look at Azure or GCP?
Yeah, so basically there is a big difference in the data points we can collect from different clouds. Like you mentioned, from that perspective, AWS is a bit more mature, and we basically work with what we have, right? So all clouds today do provide utilization metrics. So for all the clouds, we're not only using the billing data, but also the other metrics around utilization and performance to get to the deep insights and to give you the most accurate solution. Now, if we don't have a specific data point for a specific cloud provider, then we won't provide this recommendation. I personally prefer not to give a recommendation than to give something based on partial data. That's our approach. And I can tell you that even without some of the data points that you have in AWS, you can have amazing findings in other places that definitely justify, going in and start implementing this new approach and implement our platform.
Don't be afraid of you.
Thank you so much for everything that you presented today. This is really important. This is my first year actually attending the FinOps, and I just got involved. I've been price manager for 10 years, but just involved the risks with FinOps. How do you, and I don't know if you mentioned this before, how do you manage, for example, capacity management for like CPUs, IOPS, throughputs that you can, maybe use waterfall or projected preuse to be looking into anomalies or different clients. Let's say, since you're a bank, you have a wealth client. I don't know if there is like that point, if it's just for B2C, but I'm assuming you have business to business, right?
Yes, we do have a business to business.
In this case, like for more complex, sophisticated architecture, how do you properly solve, in the process flow, right, to not get to remediation and then have like all the variables together for the right planning?
So from our standpoint, it comes through the tagging, because the business to business side versus the B2C are different business units, and they're different. Other than they have their own vertical services, and obviously the shared services are common to all. But through our tagging, we're able to discriminate between who's who. And that one flow chart where it showed all the business units, you can go into the B2B and just look at their findings. And I don't know if that directly answers your question, though.
They're migrant, since they're bigger customer, many times friends have to completely over themselves, like completely filled out their architecture.
For me, I don't see that side of the business. Unfortunately, I'm a FinOps geek. I'm proud of it. I stay in my little box, and I look to see if they do onboard somebody and it causes a cost spike. That's when I would get involved.
Hi, my question for you as the FinOps team, with the fancy capability you've got, are you tracking the team's execution results in terms of their savings?
Yeah, I'll give a plug to another partner of ours, Cloud Zero. We have unit cost to serve by product every day. And we pipe in the telemetry, and we pipe in, obviously, the billing data, and we're able to see that. The hard part about that is we're a continuous release environment. So we've got to look at trends versus discrete releases. Crashes are pretty easy to spot, but everything else we look for trends, and we do measure that on a daily basis. So we can see things happening. The other thing that, and screen that was not shown, is on the analysis tab, it will give you the visuals. So we can see when things start transitioning from S3 standard to intelligent tiering standard to intelligent tiering and frequent access to intelligent tiering archive instant access. We can watch it all within the tooling and not have to go anywhere else. We don't have to go into Cost Explorer. It's all visible. So when we changed the tables over from DynamoDB standard to standard and frequent access, and whoever at AWS came up with these names, we got to have it. Seriously, that's a mouthful. We can visualize that, and the engineer can visualize that, and the members of the FinOps team can visualize that inside the tool. One space, low friction.
Oh. And then you ask, who is afraid of the cube?
So I have a tricky question actually. Once you perform an optimization and you want to measure the impact of having doing this in the past,
how do you do this? Because then if engineers start setting up the right settings for any service that they are using, 2 years from now or 1 year from now, how do you measure how much, what's the impact now? Because it is a lot of money. And in the moment, it's very easy because you compare previous month versus current month. But in 1 year, like if you want to know, what's your recommendation on this?
So what I do, I love all savings, large and small. And to get engagement from the engineers, I write a lot of blog posts internally in our Slack all engineer channel. So when we have a savings event, how I typically, and I think in 2023, I did 92 or 96 blog posts. I'm a little over 50 year to date now. Explain the problem, give praise to the engineers who worked on it. Paragraph 4 is at a unit cost level. Here's what it means at the raindrop. You saved a fraction of a cent because you have it in a lower storage class. And then here's what it means at Nubank scale. And then I present, here's what the savings is year to go because we operate on a fiscal calendar and this is what we can see an impact in the current year. And then I show what it would be on an annualized basis. So for these savings projects, I tell a story. You give the engineer all the credit. And even if I were to hand the project to the engineer and say, push this button because I don't have authority to do so within the system, which is a good thing. I report the news, engineers make the news. And engineers get all the glory and all the credit because they're the ones with the hands on the keyboard doing the work. And so for me, getting more engagement, one of the things I do is tell a lot of stories, write a lot of blog posts, and write a lot of reviews come the end of the year for the engineers who are really doing awesome things in the cost space.
This guy got hit in the face, so.
Do you track in percentage of spend how much money are you saving with PointFive, and which categories are you saving the most?
For us, the tracking the percentage, I look at the raw dollars because we are still, I have the good fortune of Nubank still being a unicorn. We're still growing. So the percentages kind of get lost in the growth, but the raw dollars are, they stand alone. And the biggest finding that I found as a collection was the DynamoDB finding. And the next biggest actually, it's not true. The biggest one is S3 list buckets. When we were a tiny bank with less than 1 million customers, there was a process developed to list the contents of an interim work bucket, and the costs were negligible. When you have 104.5 million customers, that number got really, really big, and it is still really big today. And when I went back to the engineers, it's like, oh, it works fine. Yes, it does work fine, but you're doing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of list bucket API operations over S3. And things behave differently at scale. I like to say things get weird at scale. And this list bucket issue is one of those things. And to convince the engineers, I took all of the findings in PointFive, bundled them up, put a one-pager on top of it explaining why this should be a project. And now they're working on a project and hopefully we'll deliver that by the end of the year. And the savings, are astronomical. The next biggest one was the DynamoDB, and then followed by just a variety of S3 findings of all shapes and sizes.
Nobody else's face is in danger.
Mike, I love your time correlates with finger pointing. I'm going to use that. But the question I had for you was, you talked about comments, right? And you can see who's been in. How does that jive or not with the comments that the guys might be putting on the Jira tickets? And do you have to put like an operating model, guys, please do your comments here, not here, so we're kind of making it all be in the same place?
I try to stay out of Jira as much as possible because that's considered meddling, and the engineers don't like when I poke around and start asking questions. And there's nothing prescriptive about it. Again, I feel the low drag, low friction approach. If they want to put a comment in, thank you. If they don't, and they delivered the savings, thank you. I don't want to say you did it here, now you have to replicate it there. Asking an engineer to do the same thing twice is ungood. And I don't know enough about the API structure that if they put a comment in Jira, is it backfed into PointFive? And if it isn't, I'm going to ask for it to be, because that, again, reduces friction and lets engineers keep hands on keyboards and not do what I would consider unproductive work.
But like, from our perspective, we build integrations, so it will be a bi-directional integration. So when they change something in the ticket, it's reflected by the activity log. So that allows a big organization like Nubank that has hundreds of boards, right, to stay on PointFive and see there the status of every opportunity from a single pane of glass.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosie and Alon. Give a big round of applause. All right, everybody, 30-minute break, snacks in the mega room.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoy sharing all of these amazing FinOps stories, best practices, and expertise. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for our speakers. Check out more FinOps X content on our YouTube channel. We appreciate the support.